When you hear the word Zimbabwe, the name Mugabe comes to mind. 5 years after a military coup that toppled Zimbabwe's longtime dictator, Robert Mugabe, many people in the country have come to a conclusion they can scarcely believe: they regret replacing the old despot. Many Zimbabweans are now saying their new president is even more brutal and corrupt. Though many people in Zimbabwe are glad Mugabe was ousted before he died, they have deep regrets about Emmerson Mnangagwa. His ascent to power was greeted in 2017 with jubilant street parties in Harare, with promises of witnessing the beginning of a new unfolding democracy coming from the leader. As the economy and human rights in the country continue to nosedive, Mnangagwa has proven to be ruthless and corrupt. Since becoming the president of Zimbabwe in November 2017, despite repeatedly paying lip service to calls for democratic reform, Emmerson Mnangagwa has done little to further human rights and democratic freedoms in the country. Instead, his government deepened Zimbabwe's economic struggles, enabled endemic corruption, fueled instability, and targeted opposition figures, rights activists, and journalists to strike fear into a restive population. Scores of people have been arrested, some brutalized or killed as Mnangagwa's regime mounts an unprecedented clampdown on pro-democracy campaigners, opposition political party members, journalists, and ordinary citizens daring to voice disquiet over rising corruption, the failing economy, and a human rights crisis. Since taking over the presidency, Mnangagwa's callous disregard for democracy and human rights has reached such levels that many Zimbabweans have grown nostalgic for his predecessor, Robert Mugabe, who ruled the country with an iron fist for 37 years. While Mugabe was not a better leader, life under Mnangagwa seems to be becoming worse. Under Mugabe, people were disappeared and tortured, human rights were never respected, and nothing has changed. If anything, it's worse. In 2018, 6 people were brutally killed when soldiers opened fire on opposition supporters who were protesting against attempts by the ruling ZANU-PF party to steal a tightly contested general election. To date, not a single junior or senior police or army officer has been charged or reprimanded for these killings. Worse still, the government has disregarded many of the Motlanthe Commission's noble recommendations. The families of those who were killed, and those who suffered physical injuries, have not been compensated either. Unsurprisingly, the state-sanctioned killings did not stop following this dark chapter. According to Human Rights Watch, Zimbabwean security forces killed 17 people and raped 17 women during protests in January 2019 against a 150% increase in fuel prices. Mnangagwa's spokesman at the time, George Karamba, attempted to justify the deaths, telling the state-controlled Sunday Mail newspaper that the response thus far is just a foretaste of things to come. Unfortunately, Karamba has been proven correct numerous times in the last 2 years. 2 female MDC activists and a member of parliament were reportedly abducted, tortured, and sexually assaulted by state security agents in May 2020. Zimbabweans are currently grappling with the devastation caused by not only climate change, but also economic mismanagement, corruption, and political repression, all of which Mnangagwa is responsible for. There is also ample evidence that, despite repeatedly stating its support for black indigenous farmers, the Mnangagwa administration is doing little to protect them. Indeed, the Zimbabwean state continues to encroach on black indigenous-owned farmlands with impunity. For example, in March 2021, the government approved the eviction of over 13,000 Shangaan people from their ancestral lands in the Kiredzi district in order to make way for lucerne grass farming. Despite the support of numerous local and international human rights organizations, the villagers' protests fell on deaf ears. Mnangagwa's administration is dealing with a collapsing economy, national debt is skyrocketing, the once thriving agricultural sector is on its knees, and teachers, nurses, and doctors are constantly on strike over pay. Corruption is also prevalent in all sectors of the economy, particularly gold and diamond mining, the oil industry, and government procurement. According to reports, the country loses billions of dollars each year due to gold and diamond theft. Companies or individuals with ties to senior politicians and government officials orchestrate this. Despite his public anti-corruption stance, Mnangagwa is one of the cartel bosses whose patronage and protection keep cartels afloat. At the same time, businesspeople with strong ties to senior politicians and government officials control the country's lucrative oil sector. While public resentment grows, Mnangagwa has stated that he will run for president again in 2023. The laws governing hate speech, cyberbullying, and incitement to violence, which the government routinely employs to intimidate and arrest pro-democracy activists, have not been reviewed. And no amendments have been made to the Electoral Act since the 2018 general election. The leader of the MDC alliance has vowed to block the 2023 general elections if Mnangagwa has not implemented necessary political and electoral reforms for a free and fair election. At the same time, Mnangagwa is reportedly courting minor political parties. He is trying to form a coalition government with a view to forego the 2023 election. Zimbabwe's democratic future remains uncertain. Indeed, there are legitimate concerns that Zimbabwe will face another round of state-sanctioned repression in the run-up to the 2023 elections. A disputed election has the potential to further isolate a country already beleaguered by extreme unemployment, poverty, and economic insecurity. Western countries that initially supported Mnangagwa's leadership after the November 2017 coup are now expressing displeasure with his deteriorating human rights record. Economic and political sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe in the early 2000s in reaction to widespread human rights abuses and lawlessness authorized by the ZANU-PF government of the time. Sadly, today, a new ZANU-PF government is in charge, but Zimbabweans are still suffering from similar abuses. Indeed, in some ways, Mnangagwa is outperforming his predecessor. Thanks for watching. If you like this type of content, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories.